Many people have reported on the three young girls in Varginha, Brazil, who claimed that they saw a strange alien creature in a field while walking home from work. Few, however, know about the bribe and the threat that was made to one of the girls' mothers just a couple days later by these mysterious men in black. Hello, and welcome to Rope. It's estimated that there are as many as 2 trillion galaxies in the visible universe, and each one of those galaxies contains around 200 billion stars. That means that there is a mind-boggling number of stars out there, more than 200 billion trillion stars. And of course, each one of those stars contains the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligent life. As Carl Sagan once said, if we are alone in the universe, well, it sure seems like an awful waste of space. Assuming for just a moment that there is other intelligent life out there, well, then the next question would of course be, have they discovered Earth? And if so, might there be something to these reported crashed alien spaceships? Earlier this month, we shared an account in Varginha, Brazil, of the capture and the medical treatment of a creature who had survived one of these supposed alien spaceship crashes. But that was only part of the story. Reportedly, there wasn't just one survivor from that wreck. Now, if you haven't watched that video yet, don't worry. You won't be missing anything by watching this one first. You're actually in the right place. The events of this video predate the ones in that video, and if you watch this video all the way to the end, well, that one picks up exactly where this one leaves off. In this video, as with the next, we're going to consider the possibility that aliens are here. And we'll do this by sharing the account of 2 aliens who supposedly survived a spaceship crash near Varginha, Brazil, and then went on the run. We'll first share the lesser-known story of the one's attempt to escape into the woods, and then we'll share the journey that the other one took through the city, where it was seen by several people, including those 3 girls walking home from work. Then after that, we'll share reports of a government cover-up and intimidation. And then stay with us for our Fact or Fiction segment. There, I'm going to take just a second to give my thoughts on this story. And then Amy is going to come on and she's going to share little known information about an interview that was done with the wife of a man who was directly involved with the capture of one of these alien creatures and then died. So this story begins with a phone call to the Varginha Fire Department. Around 8:30 Saturday morning, January 20th, 1996, the phone rang at the Varginha Fire Department in Brazil. Along with putting out fires, the Brazilian fire departments also aid in the capture and the transport of dangerous wild animals. One of the 6 men who were on duty that morning answered the call. The person on the other end of the line said that a strange animal had been spotted near a wooded area in the Jardim André district. So 4 of the men grabbed their gear, got into the truck, and headed out. The area that they were called to was right on the edge of town, and that particular morning, there were a couple different construction crews working on different projects. Right across the street, a new house was being built, and roofers were on the top of that house, working on the roof. And just a little ways in another direction, a group of bricklayers were working on a concrete slab. The following account comes from eyewitness testimony from both of these 2 crews and a group of witnesses who were there in the area and saw the whole thing firsthand. When the firemen first arrived, they found that the road went right up to an incline that dropped off about 50 meters at a pretty steep slope, and at the bottom there was a set of railroad tracks and an old fence that bordered right up against the forest. The men got out of the truck and they were immediately met by 5 people, a couple and 3 teenage boys. The family told the fire department that they had been out for their morning walk and they were passing this area when they spotted a strange-looking animal sort of climbing, sliding its way down the embankment toward the railroad tracks. The woman said that before she knew it, her boys had grabbed a handful of rocks and began throwing them at the animal to see what it would do. They were able to get several rocks out before she could stop them. But she said it was odd because there was absolutely no response from the animal, and some of the rocks had come really close to hitting it. She thought that the animal should have been startled by the rocks and then ran, but it didn't. It just kept steadily moving down the hill as if it had zeroed in on those trees beyond the tracks and just tuned everything else out. Well, the firemen thanked the family for the information and then they looked toward the forest. And there was no sign of the animal, and the slope down was pretty steep. After a bit, though, they decided that they'd at least make the journey down and check out that area of the woods. The roofers and the bricklayers later said that they watched as the firemen got to the bottom, crossed the railroad tracks and the fence, and then disappeared into the forest. Then, about 2 hours later, one of the firemen re-emerged, climbed back up to the truck, and radioed someone. Oh, wouldn't it have been nice if one could have known exactly what happened with those firemen in the woods? Well, turns out one of the firemen actually leaked that information. A couple of hours back, when the men had crossed the tree line into the forest, they picked up the creature's trail almost instantly, and it wasn't long until they zeroed in on it. Now, at that point, they still weren't exactly sure what it was they were looking for. So, of course, they were being extremely cautious and they were taking their time. Then, one of them spotted the creature, and he had to do a double take as he realized that this wasn't actually an animal. It was standing upright, about 5 foot tall, and it had brown skin. It had an extremely large head and thin, spindly limbs. It was at this point that the man in charge realized that he was out of his depth, and that's when he sent that man back up to the fire truck to call the military for help, while he and the others continued to pursue the creature. It's unclear if the creature used some type of mind trick on the men, or if it was just really good at evasion. But either way, it was difficult to capture. A couple different times, the men thought that they had surrounded it, but when they got right up to the bush that they thought it was hiding in, it was gone, only to be spotted rushing through the terrain a few yards away. Finally, they were able to corner it, and at that point, it just completely surrendered. The firemen took possession of it and carefully brought it out of the woods. They were about halfway up the embankment when a couple of army trucks rolled up. Now, don't forget, this whole thing is happening in broad daylight, and the men from both construction crews later said that they watched as military personnel got out of the cab of a flatbed truck and then just casually walked around to the back and removed a tarp that was covering a large wooden box. And then the military personnel walked over to the drop-off and just patiently waited for the firemen to make it to the top of the hill. The construction workers just couldn't believe what they were seeing. There was this 5 foot tall, brown skinned creature with this huge head walking upright, being escorted by these firemen. It obviously wasn't an animal, and it most certainly wasn't human. The firemen reached the top of the embankment and then turned the creature over to the military. The military took the creature back to the truck, put it in the box, and restretched the tarp over the top of it. And this next part I found extremely bizarre. Paying no attention to any of the witnesses, as if nothing had happened, the military and the firemen got back into their vehicles and then just left. A few minutes later, the men from the construction crews and the other witnesses were standing there, scratching their heads, wondering what just took place. But as surreal as this moment was, as I stated earlier, this wasn't the only extraterrestrial creature that was out on the run, trying to escape for the military that day. Reports from people seeing a strange creature came in all day long. But unlike the one that came into the fire department about a creature that was on the edge of town and heading into the forest, these other calls came in from people who were deep within the city. Starting at about 8 o'clock in the morning and continuing into the evening, dozens of people called in reporting that they saw a weird animal or a strange creature. Because these reports were so spread out and so varied, emergency vehicles weren't able to investigate all of them. But unknown to most people at the time, a highly classified, top-secret military operation was in action to locate and apprehend this creature. We did a complete report on that operation, and we'll place a video link at the end screen if you would like to see it. About 3:30 in the afternoon, 3 young girls, Liliane Silva, 16, her sister, Valquiria Silva, 14, and a friend of theirs, Katia Xavier, 22, were all walking home from work, and they were completely unprepared for what was about to happen. To save time, they all took a shortcut through a vacant field, and as the noises of the busy street were diminishing behind them, one of them spotted a strange brown animal near a concrete wall just up ahead. Well, the girls stopped and they puzzled. This didn't look like any animal they had ever seen before. They slowly approached it, and they saw that it was crouching, looking down at the dirt, kind of with its back to the girls. Later, the girls described it. They said that it looked like it was about 4 or 5 foot tall. It had dark brown skin with what appeared to be a very thick layer of oil or slime all over it. Now, keep that in mind if you're planning on watching our next report. It had a short neck and a huge head with no hair whatsoever, no eyebrows, nothing. As the girls moved closer, it slowly raised its head and then turned to face the girls. When it did, they saw its eyes, and they later all said that those eyes weren't natural at all. One girl described them as horrifying. They said that they looked like orange-red pools of liquid with no pupils, like a being without a soul, and the creature just stared at them. Well, that was enough for the girls, and they all took off in a mad dash for home. 2 of the girls turned a split second before the third one did, and in that short amount of time, where she lingered just a bit, she said that she felt as if the creature had tried to reach out to her telepathically.
I looked into his eyes and saw that it was frightened. Just as I was frightened, the creature was also frightened. I sensed it was very hot, suffering from the heat, sweating a lot, and very tired.
The girls ran to Liliane and Valkyria's home. They rushed inside and, still very much in a panic, tried to tell their mother, Luiza, what had happened. But it was difficult for her to understand. All 3 girls were crying, screaming, and talking over each other. After she was able to calm them down, Luiza had them tell her what happened one at a time. And as they spoke, she could see how sincere and how scared they all were. And she later said that she knew they were all telling the truth. After they told her the story, she decided that she'd go have a look for herself. And she told the girls to get into the truck so that they could show her where that empty field was. But they were so scared that they refused. Finally, she was able to convince the oldest, her daughter's friend Katia, to go with her. They drove back to that field, but when they got there, the creature was gone. This experience, of course, wasn't the type that one can easily keep to herself. And before long, all 3 girls started telling their friends what had happened. And that was a mistake. A couple of days after the girls saw that creature in the open field, their mother, Luiza Silva, had a very uncomfortable experience. All day long, people had been stopping by, asking her and her daughters all types of questions about that strange creature. UFO investigators, news reporters, and just curious neighbors. So when someone knocked around 9 p.m., Luiza didn't really think too much of it. The girls had already gone to bed, and without even asking, she just open the door. And when she did, these 4 men aggressively forced their way into her house. One of them was carrying a briefcase, and he immediately walked over to the kitchen table. One of them had a clipboard, and he stood beside the first. The other 2 men stood together, and they never took their eyes off of Luiza. For the entire time that the men were there, only the man with the briefcase spoke. He placed the briefcase onto the table, then looked back at Luiza and calmly told her to close the door. After she did, he placed his open palms on the briefcase, and then he gave her a bribe that somehow sounded more like a threat.
In this briefcase, there's more money than you could possibly imagine, and this money is yours. All you have to do is tell your girls that they were confused about what they saw, and make them tell everyone else that in fact what they saw was nothing. You do that, and you can have this money.
Everyone stood in silence for a moment, and then the man spoke again. This time he said that it just wouldn't be smart to pass up money like this. Something bad could happen, and she might need this money at some point in the future. While she remained silent, and he just kept trying to persuade her. Finally, she got up enough courage, and she demanded that they all just get out. After several more minutes of him trying to get her to accept the bribe and her demanding that they just get out of her house, the man took the briefcase, and the 4 of them left. Luiza later said that at that very moment, as soon as the door shut behind them, she basically collapsed onto the floor in exhaustion and fear. In our next report, I'll share how the military actually captured that creature that the girls saw. And I end that report by saying that that creature was handed over to a shadow agency somewhere in the United States. And although the trail goes cold at that point, over the years, several people have come forward claiming that they've had encounters with police and military personnel about this case. A UFO investigator named Vittorio Paccassini claimed that in 2012, he met with a high-ranking Brazilian official in a clandestine meeting. He said that he was shown a 35-second film fragment of an otherworldly creature that he described as skinny and frail. It had brown, greasy skin and large red eyes, about the size of lemons with no pupils. Its face seemed to be reptilian in appearance. The creature was alive in the video, moving around and making a buzzing sound like a bee, but it looked to him as if it were on the verge of death. Paccassini said that he has acquired solid evidence that there is an alien presence and a cover-up, even claiming that he has videotaped interviews with at least 7 different military officers, and all of this evidence that he has is locked away in a safe place for the right time. During the course of his investigation, he says that there have been several attempts on his life, and he has since moved away to Italy to escape. At some point during her studies, a UFO researcher named Patricia Fernandez Silva must have asked the wrong person the wrong question, because in 2014, she found herself detained by the former sheriff of Varginha and 4 other men. They asked her all types of questions about the Varginha case, the one that we're sharing in this report. But at that time, she didn't know anything about it. She later recalled that the sheriff's hands were permanently cupped, as if he had been suffering a lifelong neurological disease, and he had very limited mobility with his hands. The men questioned her for hours, unwilling to accept the fact that she just didn't know anything. At one point, the sheriff had the other men leave the room. And then, with his crippled hands, he struggled to reach into an old newspaper inside of a transparent folder and then pulled out a photograph. He handed it to her, and he asked if she had ever seen it before. It was a photograph of 2 creatures. They looked to be about 5 foot tall, with brown skin and huge heads. She said that they had limbs that were long and spindly. She said that one looked completely lifeless, as if it were dead. and the other one looked like it was wet, as if it had just stepped out of a swimming pool. The sheriff demanded that she tell him what she knew about those creatures, but she said that she just didn't know anything. Then after a while, with her not changing her story, the sheriff began to calm down, and then he finally told her what happened to his hands. He said that they used to be normal, but then one day, in a top secret situation, he grabbed onto a creature like of one of the ones in the photograph, and then shortly after that, they shriveled up, and he's been paralyzed ever since. The information in this video came from several independent witnesses who all seem very sincere, and many of them have absolutely nothing to gain. And remember, the roofers working on that house didn't necessarily know the bricklayers who were working on that concrete slab, but both groups told the exact same story, and other witnesses who were there and watched the fire department bring that creature up from the woods also told the same story. The three girls who claimed that they saw that creature in the field were adamant about what they saw, and they've given several interviews over the years, and they've never changed their story. Amy found information on an interview that was done with the widow of one of the men who actually captured one of these creatures.
Yeah, I think it's cool. What an amazing journey so far.
So we don't have a sponsor yet, so I'm going to do a quick commercial and talk about our merchandise.
Awesome.
So if you haven't gotten any of our merchandise, and we said this before, if you want to become a knot in our rope, then go on over to Fourth Wall. The link is in the description, and you can have a piece of rope in your house. I'm a terrible commercial maker.
You're not. I mean, let me just add on. One of the reasons I have this sitting here is because I also designed one for folks who love aliens. So there's some alien merch on our Fourth Wall as well.
This video is about aliens.
It sure is.
So what do you have for us on this video?
Okay, so in this report, you talked about possible government intimidation. Okay, so I found an interview done with Marco Chirizi's wife. Now, Marco Chirizi, more about him in our next video, but he was the soldier who touched a creature and died not long after.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in 2002, Dr. Roger Lear flew to Varginha and interviewed Marco Chirizi's, then widow. Okay. And I thought there were some very interesting things that came out of that interview. Okay. She was very stoic, almost stone-faced.
Did you watch the interview yourself?
I watched some of it, and I also, as you know, I've read several of Dr. Lear's books.
Right.
Right.
So I'm sorry. So she was stoic?
She was stoic. Her answers, many of them, she responded, "I don't know. I don't know." Things that I thought, well, you would know that. But there was also some more revealing information. She did say that she asked for Marco Chirizi's records, medical records, death certificate, and was refused.
That's
copies
crazy.
of those records. Yeah, that was strange. She also said that she was never told the official manner of death. To me, I was like, what? Oh, I anything happened to you, I would really be the biggest pain ever. But anyway, what I found, I think the most interesting was she said that she did not attend the funeral because she had no idea they had a funeral.
That's
no idea.
Crazy.
Yeah, no idea when it was.
Yeah, when you dug up that information, I thought, well, what came to my mind was, did he even die?
Oh, that's
Because, well, I mean, so it just blew my mind. So he goes through, he touches this alien. Let's suppose he did. He touches this alien. He gets sick, right? The government's all over trying to figure out what's going on. Then he dies.
Yeah.
Well, after he dies, maybe they don't want nobody touching him. I get it. Maybe he's got to be quarantined. But why would you not tell the family when the funeral is?
Right.
It seems to me it's because there wasn't a funeral.
Oh.
I don't know. I don't know. It just seems bizarre. So it's like, is Marco Chirizi still alive? And they're running tests on him right now because, well, the alien touched him and he's half alien.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
I don't know. I'm not saying I believe that. I'm not saying I believe that. It's just something weird.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Ooh, that's a rabbit hole I could go down for years. Anyway, so Dr. Lear wrote about his experience doing this interview, and I want to read an actual quote, the notes that he wrote down, because I think he brings up some very good points. Okay, so he says, and I quote from his book: "Watching her movements during the questioning was most interesting because it was obvious, even to a non-student of NLP, that she was hiding a great deal of information. Her negative comments indicated a high probability of intimidation and resultant fear, perhaps generated by the military or other representatives of the Brazilian government."
Wow.
Yeah, he's a doctor, and he's looking at the footage and reviewing his notes and saying, oh my gosh, what she didn't answer really gave me more information than what she did.
And the body language and the way she was. Exactly. And he was sitting there doing the interview.
Yep.
Wow. So I got to ask you then, what did you think about the alien that was the story of the alien in the woods and was brought up by the fire department?
Right.
Did you think that happened?
Okay, something happened, right? You have members of the fire department, you have roofers, you have workers, right? There's a housing addition being built not far. They've got a perfect line of sight to things going on. They see military trucks pull up. I feel like something happened. And then that family that came forward and said, our kids were throwing rocks at this thing. And we realized, oh my gosh, this is not a normal, just animal in the wild.
So you think something happened?
I think something happened. Something happened
but
in
you
Virginia.
Just don't know what it was.
Yeah, no, not yet.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
So, did an alien spaceship crash near Varginha, Brazil in 1996? Well, there is a lot of information out there on this case. There's way too much actually for us to put into just one video, so we made several. What we shared in this video is just part of the story. Several other people claimed that they saw the creature wandering around Varginha, and eventually the military captured it. Amy was able to find a ton of information about what happened to that creature after that, and we did a complete report on it. And if you'd like to see it, it's here.
Hey everybody, check out our merch, check out our Buy Me a Coffee, and check out our next report. News.
That's my line.
I just stuck it 3 times.
Well, check this out.
Oh.
Thanks, guys.